Hi, this is Kate from Generate Magic, and today I'd like to touch upon two concepts that I discussed in short videos recently. One is this whole idea that you need another person, namely a significant other or a soulmate, to complete you. And the other is this idea that we are somehow broken or that there's something wrong with us that needs to be fixed. And I think these two concepts really go hand in hand, because if we're operating from the premise that we're broken or that there's something wrong with us, we then are very vulnerable to this other belief that we need a soulmate, we need a significant other to rescue us. And really, it's rescuing us from this feeling, right? This feeling of being broken or insignificant. And we need somebody else to love us enough to prove to ourselves that we're worthy of love. And like I said, I think I'm just as vulnerable to it as anybody else. Like Hollywood movies, music, all this kind of stuff. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. This whole idea of falling, head over heels for somebody and having that person being your whole universe. And then suddenly life just becomes more magical and all your problems are solved, which of course, as we all know, isn't really how reality works or how life works. And at the same time, not only did this idea of having another person complete me, not only was it very alluring to me, but also this idea that I would be the completion for another person. And so I had relationships that you would call projects more so than healthy relationships, where I would, in fact, my last long-term relationship was with a man who had suffered a lot of childhood trauma, struggled with addiction, and I saw myself as being his savior, essentially, that if I just gave him enough love and proved to him that he was worthy of love, then I would be fulfilling my life purpose. And which is now that I, look back on it, it's so ridiculous and it feels very pretentious, saying that, that I truly believe that about myself. But that was my line of thinking at the time. And I had a really good coaching session today with Tim Grimes. I don't know if you're familiar with his YouTube channel, but we talked about this whole idea of parts, and I think it's called family therapy systems, and this idea of being sort of like, we all have these different needs, and sometimes it feels like these different parts are in direct competition with each other. And so like a lot of women, I kind of have these competing beliefs or desires to, on one hand, be a strong, independent woman, and then on the other hand, to have this soulmate who completes me. And so it's these kind of conflicting, like this tug of war between these two desires. And another thing that we uncovered in our session today, and which I was already aware of, but we really kind of went in depth on it, is these competing desires on the one hand to just be completely, I guess you would call it, selfish, and just want to go, just want to have a life of fun and freedom and partying all the time, and then no responsibilities whatsoever. And then on the other hand, to have this life of purpose where, in service to others. And so like helping homeless people and going into prisons and doing all these things to reach all these people. And so I really got deep on these two desires that I have, which on the one hand feel like competing desires, but as we really went deeper, I realized that they don't have to be in competition with each other. And I had heard of this type of therapy, I guess it's called family systems therapy. I need to look it up afterwards. I had heard of it before. In fact, I have friends who actually do it. as therapists themselves and as coaches, and I had always resisted it. And I guess part of me resisted it because I felt like it kind of encouraged fragmentation or disassociation. And then another part of me, and this is the more superficial reaction, just thought it sounded ridiculous. Like, especially when people would be talking about their parts, and one part wants this and another part wants that. And I just thought, oh, that sounds silly. That sounds like a bunch of psychobabble. and but now I see that neither of those opinions are really valid, that it is a really great tool once I really went deep on it and got past some of those initial prejudices that I had. And because it actually, as instead of encouraging fragmentation as I had initially thought, it's actually doing the opposite. It's actually encouraging integration and this more holistic, unified viewpoints. And I know I'm not special in any sense. I know all of us have these conflicting desires, and especially when it comes to messages that have been passed down to us through society and programming, from the media, from our families, from generation after generation. And it can be very confusing. It can be very hard to parse out what it is that you truly want from other people telling you what it is that you should want. And as a woman who's getting, I don't want to say older, but I'm approaching my 40s, and motherhood has been a thought that's been on my mind recently, and just kind of this whole idea that on the one hand I should want it because I'm a woman, and that's just kind of what you do. What women are supposed to do is give birth. And then there's another part of me that kind of fears, I have all these things that I still want to accomplish, and I fear that I would lose myself, that I would lose my freedom, that I wouldn't be able to accomplish these goals. And then, but then there's another part of me saying, oh, well, you're just being selfish. And so, yeah, it's just this whole kind of tug of war in my mind. And I think a lot of women can probably relate to this, and probably relate to this whole kind of competition, or at least perceived competition, between traditional values and modern values. And it can be so black and white the way these things are presented to us. This whole idea that has to be one way or the other, that either more progressive modern values, that's the way to go, and going back to the whole idea of the strong independent woman, that's the ideal way to be. And then on the other hand, these more traditional values, that's the way to go, and that we need to actually, and in fact that the whole way society is the way it is because we've abandoned these traditional values, and that we need to actually return to these values, and then that's how we're going to quote unquote save society, or solve all the problems that society is facing. And I'm definitely not going to pretend to have all the answers, and certainly it's outside of the scope of this video to attempt to untangle all of these questions or answer all of these questions. But I can definitely say without a doubt that it's not just one way or the other. It's not just A or B, and there's way more options and possibilities that are out there than just the two that have been presented to us. And another YouTuber who I really like, Quantum of Conscious, talks about this too. He calls it like the Coke versus Pepsi line of thinking, where we're kind of programmed to believe that there's only two choices, which then creates division, because it always feels like it's a competition between these two things, when in reality there's so many more choices at our disposal, and it doesn't have to be a competition. We can integrate all of these different beliefs. So I know this all feels like a long tangent, but it actually, maybe it was, but it actually connects back to the point that I initially brought up at the beginning, this whole idea that we need somebody else to complete us, and this whole idea that we're broken. And I think both of these ideas stem from the things I talked about, but then also this line of thinking that there's this conflict, right? This internal conflict of being pulled between these competing desires, these competing perceived obligations, what we want between what we should be doing, and so then in our confusion, we start to think that we're broken. We start to think that there's something wrong with us or that we're losing our mind. And we also start to think that we need another person to help us parse out this confusion, to help us, to give us the answers, or at least get us out of our heads. And so, because when you're alone, you spend a lot more time grappling with these sorts of questions and driving yourself crazy. But in reality, as I discovered in my session with Tim today, we can give ourselves the answers that we're looking for. And I don't mean the answer in the way that we're taught in school, right, where something is either right or wrong, but I mean the clarity that we're looking for. And we can at least help ourselves to find some sense of relief, which is really, I think, what we're all looking for. And so we can be our own, in that sense, we can be our own coach and our own therapist and our own teacher. And like I practice with him today, we can kind of play, we can talk to the part of ourselves, the childish part of ourselves that wants to be selfish, and then at the same time we can communicate with the other part of ourselves, the disciplinarian part of ourselves that wants focus and order and structure. And so, and even before, I want to add also, even before I knew about, or really dived into this whole type of looking at your parts, I had practiced inner dialogues with myself. And maybe because I'm a writer, this has always appealed to me. But one of the best ways to kind of get out of your head, and when you're going through these phases of, oh, do I do this or do I do that? What is it that I want? What is it I should be doing? Is to get it out of your head and onto paper. And actually have a written dialogue with yourself, just like a screenplay, where you're giving these different parts of yourself, these different voices in your head are actually communicating with each other, just like characters in a movie. And in this communication, because when you're writing a script, right, no matter how conflict-oriented or fraught with conflict the conversation starts out at the beginning, you always, through the process of writing out the conversation, you always end up arriving at some sort of conclusion by the end of it. And so that's what you naturally do by writing out these inner dialogues with yourself. And so yeah, I'll do it if I find myself being like unnaturally upset about something, and I'm like, why am I so, why is this comment, which on the surface seems like a completely benign comment, why is it making me so, not making me, why do I feel so frustrated? Or why do I feel so aggravated by this comment? And why, or why are the littlest things making me so irritated today? And as I engage in this dialogue with myself, with these different voices in my head or competing parts of myself, I can actually start to understand, that's because of such and such. I can kind of uncover some deeper reason beneath it. And I definitely don't recommend doing this for everything, because otherwise you'll just be doing this all day, and not everything deserves deeper analysis. And one thing that has been very freeing to me as a chronic overthinker and somebody who's constantly in my head is just kind of knowing that we think probably millions of thoughts every day, and the majority of these thoughts are completely meaningless. They never come to fruition in any sort of way. And so not to be too concerned with if you're dwelling in negative thoughts, or if you're dwelling in frustration or anger, or because that also can be kind of a self-perpetuating cycle where you're getting upset and then beating yourself up over getting upset. And then it never seems to end, right? And so, so I think another technique that can be helpful is, um, is movement. And so for me, physical movement helps. So taking a walk, doing laundry, dancing is a big one for me. And again, that also kind of helps those thoughts to start circulating. So physical movement, writing, yeah, anything just to kind of get it in circulation. So not everything demands deeper analysis, but sometimes it is, especially if it's something recurring or it's a competing pattern. I think it can be helpful to dive deeper and really kind of uncover what it is that's going on. And more than that, I think it's very empowering if you're not getting what you're craving from a parent or from a friend or from a significant other or a teacher or whatever it is. If if the people in your life are not showing up the way you would like them to really just kind of take that as an opportunity to go within yourself and give yourself whatever it is that you're craving or that you feel you really need. And so with that said, thank you so much for watching, and always remember that you are perfect, you are whole and complete, you are a universe unto itself, and have a wonderful rest of your day.